From Jesse the Body Ventura, accusing him of the ultimate betrayal,
When was the last time you spoke to Hulk Hogan?
I don't know. He betrayed me.
to Bret the Hitman Hart, accusing him of career sabotage.
I can't believe that Hulk Hogan would do this to me.
Hulk Hogan may be a legend to fans, but to many fellow wrestlers, he's the villain. Here are 10 WWE stars who openly despise him, and their reasons are more shocking than you think. Doink the Clown, Matt Bourne. Let's start our countdown with a wrestler whose colorful exterior masked some very serious grievances with Hulk Hogan, Matt Bourne, better known as the original Doink the Clown. Now, you might be wondering how a clown character could have beef with the immortal Hulk Hogan, but Matt Bourne's issues with Hogan ran much deeper than wrestling storylines.
I do not have any respect for him to this day, and I would like the guy, but I don't have any respect for him. You know, I believe he's not a real person. You know? I think everything's a facade with Hulk Hogan.
Bourne accused Hogan of being phony and mistreating people backstage, claiming he couldn't respect or look Hogan in the eye due to his hypocrisy. In the wrestling business, respect is everything, and when a fellow wrestler says they can't even make eye contact with you due to your behavior, that's about as serious an indictment as you can get. Bourne's comments suggest that Hogan's backstage persona was so different from his public image that it genuinely disgusted those who had to work with him regularly.
I didn't give a about Hogan.
15 minutes.
I didn't care, you know. I never put him over when he was around. I never even went out of my way to talk to him.
The hypocrisy that Bourne referenced likely stemmed from Hogan's public persona as an all-American hero who preached about training, prayers, and vitamins, while allegedly behaving in completely opposite ways behind the scenes. For someone like Matt Bourne, who prided himself on authenticity even while playing a clown character, this kind of two-faced behavior would have been particularly galling. The fact that these criticisms came from someone who never had major championship aspirations or main event feuds with Hogan makes them even more credible. Bourne wasn't motivated by jealousy over lost opportunities or buried storylines. His disdain was purely based on witnessing Hogan's character and behavior as a human being and fellow professional. Bruno Sammartino. At number 9, we have perhaps the most respected name in WWE history, Bruno Sammartino, the man who carried the company on his back for over a decade with 2 epic WWE championship reigns, totaling over 11 years. Sammartino disliked Hogan's cartoonish style overshadowing traditional wrestling and accused him of ego-driven politics. Sammartino refused Hall of Fame induction until Hogan's era passed, when Hogan emerged with his Hollywood persona and entertainment-focused approach. It represented everything Sammartino felt was wrong with the direction of the business.
This is the same guy who says that he took wrestling out of the smoke-filled little back alley, whatever he called it, to mainstream. You know, before this idiot, and I'll call him an idiot, came into the scene, there was an Argentino Rocca who was wrestling in Madison Square Garden and all the other big arenas.
The most telling aspect of Sammartino's hatred for Hogan was his refusal to accept induction into the WWE Hall of Fame while Hogan was still prominently featured in the company. Think about that for a moment. Bruno Sammartino, the man who arguably built WWE into what it became, refused the company's highest honor because he couldn't stomach being associated with what Hogan represented. For Bruno, wrestling wasn't just entertainment. It was a legitimate athletic competition that deserved respect. He had come from an era where wrestlers were expected to be tough, legitimate athletes who could handle themselves in any situation. Hogan's over-the-top character work and limited in-ring ability represented a departure from those values that Sammartino couldn't accept.
Why don't he talk about the wonderful things he did to this business by being one of the wonderful steroid chemical robots that came to this business, which is an unfortunate and tragic thing because there have been a lot of deaths, drug-related.
But Bruno's issues with Hogan went beyond just stylistic differences. He was particularly critical of Hogan's ego-driven politics and how the Hulkster used his influence to maintain his position while potentially holding back more deserving talent. Coming from someone who had voluntarily given up the WWE Championship multiple times to help elevate new stars, this criticism was particularly damning. Sammartino's immigrant background also gave him a unique perspective on what it meant to be an American hero. Bruno had come to America from Italy as a child and built his career on the values values of hard work, determination, and genuine heroism. When he looked at Hogan, he saw someone who was playing a character rather than living those values, and that fundamental inauthenticity troubled him deeply. The respect that Bruno Sammartino commanded in the wrestling business made his criticism of Hogan particularly significant. When the man who is widely considered the greatest WWE champion of all time refuses to be in the same Hall of Fame as you, that sends a pretty clear message about your character and reputation among your peers. Randy Savage. At number 8, we have one of wrestling's most tragic stories of friendship turned to hatred. Randy Macho Man Savage. Savage harbored resentment over personal issues involving Miss Elizabeth, accusing Hogan of overstepping. Though they reconciled before Savage's 2011 death, Savage publicly trashed Hogan in raps and interviews beforehand.
His real name is Terry Bollea, my real name is Randy Poffo, and he disrespected me and my family through the media wave.
The personal issues involving Miss Elizabeth that drove a wedge between Savage and Hogan have been the subject of wrestling speculation for decades. While the exact details have never been fully confirmed, the suggestion that Hogan overstepped boundaries regarding Savage's real-life wife and on-screen manager created a rift that would define both men's later careers.
Here's the situation with me and Hulk Hogan. It's just, we've been acquaintances at best, never been best friends, never been friends.
The tragedy of the Savage-Hogan relationship was how their professional success together in the late 1980s masked the growing personal tensions between them. As the mega powers, they were one of WWE's most successful storylines, but behind the scenes, their friendship was deteriorating due to issues that had nothing to do with wrestling storylines and everything to do with real-life personal conflicts.
He's a wuss. You see what I'm saying? He goes on the airwaves and he disrespects me. He gives me a shot over the radio, gives me a shot over the TV, he gives me a shot over the internet, here and there, but nothing face to face.
The reconciliation that occurred before Savage's death in 2011 adds another layer of complexity to their story. Hogan's induction speech for Savage into the WWE Hall of Fame after his death showed genuine emotion and regret, suggesting that whatever had driven them apart, both men ultimately wanted to repair their friendship. But the years of hatred and resentment between them had taken their toll. Savage's refusal to work with WWE for years was partly attributed to his issues with Hogan, and their inability to resolve their differences professionally cost both men potential opportunities and earnings. Their story serves as a cautionary tale about how the wrestling business could destroy even the strongest friendships when egos, money, and personal issues collide. CM Punk. Coming in at number 7 is CM Punk, the outspoken straight-edge superstar who never held back his opinions about wrestling's biggest names. Punk called Hogan a piece of garbage and said F him in interviews, invoking him negatively in his 2011 pipe bomb promo. Punk's dislike grew after meeting him and learning of his scandals.
You put Hulk Hogan in the Royal Rumble, I'll throw his dust over the top rope, and I'll kill Hulkamania once and for all.
Punk's famous pipe bomb promo in 2011 referenced Hogan negatively, using the Hulkster as an example of everything wrong with WWE's corporate culture and star-making process. This wasn't just a worked shoot. Punk was expressing genuine frustration with how WWE operated and how legends like Hogan were treated compared to current wrestlers who were doing the actual work.
You're as good as kissing Vince's Hulk Hogan was.
What made Punk's criticism particularly damaging was that it came from someone who had no personal history with Hogan during his prime years. Punk's dislike grew after meeting Hogan and learning of his scandals, suggesting that his negative opinion was based purely on Hogan's behavior and reputation, rather than any personal grudges or professional conflicts. Punk's straight-edge lifestyle also put him at philosophical odds with Hogan's approach to the wrestling business. As someone who prided himself on being completely honest and authentic, Punk was naturally repelled by what he saw as Hogan's dishonesty and manipulation. The contrast between Punk's principled stance on drugs and alcohol and Hogan's later admitted steroid use would have been particularly galling to someone with Punk's moral convictions. The timing of Punk's most harsh criticisms of Hogan also coincided with some of Hogan's biggest scandals, including the racism controversy. For someone like Punk, who had always positioned himself as socially conscious and progressive, Hogan's revealed attitudes would have been completely unacceptable. Punk's position as someone who had main evented WrestleMania and held the WWE Championship for over 400 days also gave his criticism additional credibility. This wasn't coming from someone who was bitter about never reaching the top. It was coming from someone who had achieved wrestling's highest honors and still found Hogan's behavior unacceptable. Scott Steiner. At number 6, we have Scott Steiner, the genetically gifted superstar whose hatred for Hulk Hogan was as explosive as his personality. Steiner labeled Hogan a piece of shit and racist in shoots, citing Hogan's induction of Randy Savage, whom Steiner said hated Hogan, and airport threats. Their WCW history amplified this. Scott Steiner's animosity toward Hulk Hogan was rooted in years of working together in WCW and witnessing firsthand how Hogan operated behind the scenes. As someone who was never afraid to speak his mind or pull punches, Steiner became one of Hogan's most vocal and persistent critics, delivering scathing assessments that left no doubt about his feelings.
I got beat my first, match after turning heel. The call was made by Hulk Hogan to have me get beat.
Steiner's labeling of Hogan as a piece of shit and racist wasn't just casual trash talk. These were serious accusations made by someone who had worked closely with Hogan during some of the most successful and controversial periods of both their careers. What made Steiner's criticism particularly interesting was his reference to Randy Savage's feelings about Hogan. Steiner claimed that Savage hated Hogan, and given Steiner's friendship with Savage, he would have been in a position to know the real story behind their relationship. This added an additional layer of credibility to Steiner's attacks, as he was speaking not just from his own experience, but from what he had learned from other wrestlers who had worked with Hogan. The Big Bad Booty Daddy's criticism also reflected his own experiences trying to reach the top of the card in WCW, while Hogan maintained his stranglehold on the main event scene. As someone with legitimate amateur wrestling credentials and incredible physical gifts, Steiner would have been particularly frustrated by what he saw as Hogan's undeserved position at the top of the promotion. Steiner's willingness to continue attacking Hogan years after their WCW days had ended showed that this wasn't just professional frustration, it was genuine personal dislike based on what he had witnessed and experienced. The fact that he continued to call Hogan out in interviews and shoot videos demonstrated that these feelings hadn't diminished with time.
When another wrestler decides he's going to decide who wins is bullshit.
Why do you think he did that?
He's a There's no other way he could say it. He's a piece of shit.
He's a piece of shit. The racist accusations that Steiner made against Hogan also proved to be prescient, given the later revelation of Hogan's racist comments in the 2015 tape scandal. This suggested that Steiner may have been aware of Hogan's attitudes long before they became public knowledge, making his earlier criticisms seem even more credible in hindsight. Iron Chic. At number 5, we have the Iron Chic, whose hatred for Hulk Hogan became legendary through his unfiltered social media presence. Sheik frequently tweeted, "F*** Hulk Hogan," and called him out for ego and racism, stemming from their 1984 feud and real-life clashes. Sheik's disdain was public until his death.
And after I lost my belt to him, Mr. Howard, he come in the locker room. He said, "Shiki baby, I love you. I owe you one." And after that, he never returned my call back.
The Iron Sheik's famous Hulk Hogan tweets became a recurring theme on his social media accounts, delivered with the same intensity and conviction that he had brought to his wrestling character. The 1984 feud between Iron Sheik and Hulk Hogan was supposed to be the launching pad for Hulkamania, with Sheik doing the job to help establish Hogan as the all-American hero. But behind the scenes, the relationship between the two men was far more complicated than their simple good versus evil storyline suggested. What made Iron Sheik's hatred particularly fascinating was how it combined professional and personal grievances. The ego and racism that Sheik called out weren't just general criticisms. They were specific accusations based on years of working with and observing Hogan both in and out of the ring.
But I don't like Hulk Hogan himself.
The social media aspect of Iron Sheik's hatred for Hogan was particularly entertaining because it showed how wrestling's old-school grudges had adapted to modern technology. Instead of settling their differences in the ring or behind closed doors, Sheik used Twitter as his platform to launch regular attacks on Hogan, creating a running commentary on their decades-old conflict. What made the Iron Sheik's criticism particularly credible was his willingness to maintain it consistently over many years. This wasn't just a temporary beef or a work designed to generate publicity. It was a sustained, genuine expression of dislike that continued right up until Sheik's death. The racist accusations that Iron Sheik made against Hogan were particularly significant, given his own status as an Iranian-American wrestler who had often been portrayed as a foreign heel. His perspective on racism in wrestling came from someone who had experienced it from the other side, giving his accusations additional credibility. Iron Sheik's hatred also reflected the complex relationships that existed in wrestling's territorial era, where wrestlers often had to work together professionally while harboring genuine personal animosity. The fact that their conflict persisted long after both men's active wrestling careers had ended showed just how deep their issues ran. Jesse Ventura. Coming in at number 4 is Jesse "The Body" Ventura, whose hatred for Hulk Hogan stemmed from what he considered the ultimate betrayal of wrestler solidarity. Ventura accused Hogan of snitching to Vince McMahon about his 1986 unionization efforts, leading to threats of firings. Ventura called Hogan a backstabber and narcissist in interviews and his book.
You and Hulk were once good friends.
Yeah,
What's the likelihood of that ever being repaired?
never.
Why?
Can't trust him. I'm not friends with anyone I don't trust. I have to have a trust with someone to be their friend. And he's the one that ratted me to Vince when I tried to unionize.
The 1986 unionization effort that Ventura led could have fundamentally changed the wrestling business, providing wrestlers with health care, retirement benefits, and basic worker protections that they still lack today. Ventura rallied the locker room before WrestleMania 2, but Hogan allegedly informed McMahon, who threatened firings. This betrayal wasn't just a personal slight. It was an action that potentially cost every wrestler in the company millions of dollars in benefits and protections over the subsequent decades. The discovery of Hogan's role in sabotaging the union effort came years later during Ventura's 1991 lawsuit against McMahon over royalties, where testimony revealed Hogan's role. This meant that Ventura had to live with the consequences of the failed unionization for years before even knowing who was responsible for its failure.
And I didn't show any emotion, but I almost tipped over in the chair because he was my friend. And I thought, but then I understand why. When we went to court, I saw in WrestleMania 3, Hogan got paid more than all of us combined. Now, why would he want a union when he's getting taken care of?
What made Hogan's betrayal particularly galling was the motivation behind it. Ventura noted that Hogan prioritized his high pay more than the WrestleMania 3 roster combined over his peers. While other wrestlers were struggling without basic benefits, Hogan was earning more than the entire roster and actively working to prevent his colleagues from improving their situations. Ventura's background made this betrayal even more personally offensive. As someone who had served in the military and later became involved in politics, Ventura understood the importance of collective action and solidarity. His experience with the Screen Actors Guild from his role in Predator had shown him how unions could protect performers, making Hogan's sabotage even more frustrating. The long-term implications of Hogan's actions cannot be overstated. Wrestling remains non-unionized to this day, with sources citing this incident as a core reason. Every wrestler who has suffered from a lack of health care, every performer who has struggled in retirement without a pension, and every talent who has been taken advantage of by promoters can trace some of their problems back to this moment.
If you start working with WWE again, would you consider burying the hatchet with Hulk Hogan?
No,
Conversation, at least?
I don't know.
When was the last time you spoke to Hulk Hogan?
I don't know. He betrayed me.
The fact that Ventura never reconciled with Hogan, recently calling him out for his Trump rally appearances, shows that this wasn't just a temporary disagreement. Ventura's continued criticism decades later demonstrates that he viewed Hogan's betrayal as unforgivable. The Undertaker. At number 3, we have The Undertaker, whose revelation about Hulk Hogan's deception sent shockwaves through the wrestling world. Undertaker revealed Hogan lied about a neck injury from a tombstone piledriver in 1991 to avoid jobbing, calling it a betrayal that damaged trust. He discussed this in recent podcasts, highlighting Hogan's self-preservation.
I didn't know that I was going to drop the belt back and what was going on. I mean, that came up out of nowhere. But I kind of figured like, oh, okay, maybe it's because he's telling everybody that I hurt him, Hulk was still the golden goose at the time.
The Undertaker's revelation about Hulk Hogan's deception represents one of the most damaging accusations ever made against the Hulkster, particularly because it came from one of wrestling's most respected figures. When The Undertaker speaks, the wrestling world listens, and his account of Hogan's dishonesty carried enormous weight throughout the industry. The incident at Tuesday in Texas in 1991 involving the Tombstone piledriver was supposed to be a routine spot in their match, but according to The Undertaker, Hogan lied about suffering a neck injury to avoid doing the job, using a fabricated injury as an excuse to protect his character and championship status. What made this betrayal particularly hurtful for The Undertaker was that it occurred early in his WWE career when he was still establishing himself as a main event talent. Having the company's top star lie about an injury caused by his finishing move could have seriously damaged The Undertaker's credibility and potentially derailed his push toward the top of the card.
I was like, Terry, I watched it back. Your head never hit. He was like, well, brother, what it was you had me so tight that when we came down, I had nowhere to move. And that's what jammed my neck, because I couldn't move at all.
You're too tight.
The Undertaker felt betrayed because Hogan later admitted it was to protect his spot amid rising stars like The Rock. This admission revealed that Hogan's deception wasn't based on legitimate concern about his safety or health. It was purely a political maneuver designed to maintain his position at the top of the company. What made Hogan's deception particularly egregious was how it potentially affected The Undertaker's reputation as a safe worker. In professional wrestling, being known as someone who injures opponents can be career-ending, and Hogan's false injury claim could have seriously damaged The Undertaker's standing with management and fellow wrestlers. The revelation also highlighted how Hogan's self-preservation instincts often came at the expense of his colleagues' careers and reputations. While Hogan was protecting his own character and storylines, he was potentially damaging other wrestlers' careers and creating unnecessary drama and conflict behind the scenes. Shawn Michaels. At number 2, we have Shawn Michaels, whose 2005 feud with Hulk Hogan became legendary for all the wrong reasons. Michaels mocked Hogan during their 2005 feud, overselling moves in protest after Hogan refused a multi-match series where he'd lose more than once. Michaels has implied Hogan's ego made working with him difficult. Supposed to be a dream match between two of wrestling's biggest stars, instead became a masterclass in how personal animosity and professional frustration could be expressed through in-ring performance. Michaels wanted a multi-match series, but Hogan allegedly refused to lose more than once, which led to one of the most entertaining displays of professional pettiness in wrestling history. Rather than simply going through the motions, Michaels decided to make his frustration known through his performance, overselling Hogan's offense to selling that Michaels engaged in wasn't just unprofessional behavior, it was a calculated artistic statement about what he thought of Hogan's wrestling ability and ego. Every exaggerated bump and dramatic reaction was Michaels' way of saying that if Hogan wanted to be treated like a legitimate main event wrestler, he needed to act like one. What made the situation particularly frustrating for Michaels was that he was at a point in his career where he was putting over younger talent and helping to elevate the next generation of stars. Hogan's refusal to do the same, despite being well past his prime, represented everything that Michaels felt was wrong with wrestling's old guard. The backstage tension between Michaels and Hogan also reflected broader issues within WWE at the time, as the company was trying to balance respect for its legends with the need to create new stars. Hogan's unwillingness to put over current talent represented a fundamental misunderstanding of his role as a returning legend. Bret Hart. And at number 1, we have Bret the Hitman Hart, whose comprehensive and devastating criticism of Hulk Hogan represents perhaps the most thorough takedown of the Hulkster ever delivered by a fellow wrestler. Hart has repeatedly called Hogan a phony and accused him of sabotaging his career, including refusing to drop the WWF title to him after WrestleMania 9. In his autobiography and interviews, Hart said Hogan didn't know a headlock from a headlamp and held grudges over poor WCW booking influenced by Hogan.
He was a guy that thought he was everything in wrestling and that everyone else was, we were all backup players to Hulk Hogan, and that's the way he saw it. And once that belt was on me, I became the enemy or somebody that had to be removed.
Bret Hart's hatred for Hulk Hogan is perhaps the most well-documented and comprehensive criticism ever leveled against the Hulkster by a fellow wrestler. Hart's attacks weren't just emotional outbursts or temporary grievances. They were calculated, detailed indictments based on years of professional interaction and personal observation. The WrestleMania 9 incident that Hart frequently references represents everything that Hart felt was wrong with Hogan's approach to the wrestling business. After Hart had worked a grueling match against Yokozuna and lost the WWE Championship, Hogan allegedly convinced Vince McMahon to change the planned ending, inserting himself into the main event to win the title in a matter of minutes. This wasn't just about Hart losing a championship, it was about Hogan's complete disregard for storytelling, logic, and fairness. Hart claimed Hogan promised to drop the belt to him later, but reneged, using his backstage influence to avoid putting Hart over while making Hart look weak in the process. Hart's famous assessment that Hogan didn't know a headlock from a headlamp became one of wrestling's most quoted criticisms, perfectly encapsulating Hart's view that Hogan's wrestling ability was vastly overrated compared to his drawing power and political acumen. But Hart's criticism extended far beyond just Hogan's in-ring abilities. Hart accused Hogan of framing him as a tag team wrestler in private discussions, attempting to undermine Hart's credibility as a singles competitor, despite Hart's obvious talent and accomplishments.
I'm pissed off. I'm so mad. I can't believe that Hulk Hogan would do this to me. Like, I was a guy that always thought of him as a friend and vice versa. And this, I know I worked really hard to finally climb up that ladder to get to that spot. I worked so hard, and here he was was stopping me.
The personal nature of Hart's attacks on Hogan reflected the deep hurt and frustration that the excellence of execution felt over what he saw as deliberate career sabotage. Coming from someone with Hart's reputation for professionalism and technical excellence, these accusations carried enormous weight within the wrestling industry. Hart's issues with Hogan persisted into their WCW days, where Hogan's influence led to Hart's poor booking. This showed that Hart's problems with Hogan weren't just about specific incidents, but about a pattern of behavior that continued across multiple promotions and decades. The fact that Hart continued to criticize Hogan years after both men's active careers had ended demonstrated that these weren't just professional disagreements, but genuine personal animosity based on what Hart saw as fundamental character flaws in Hogan's personality and approach to the business. And with that, we've come to the end of this deep dive. For more juicy content like this, smash that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, and check out the card showing on your screen for more videos. Don't forget to comment your thoughts below.